To the provisions of Section 268030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, notice is hereby given that decisions of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County Community Oversight Board may be appealed to the Davidson County Chancery Court for review under a common law writ of cert. Any appeal must be filed within 60 days after the entry of a final decision by the board. Any person or other entity considering an appeal should consult with an attorney to ensure that time and procedural requirements are met. There are 6 members here, so there's quorum, and we can start with approval of the minutes. So you should have the September 18th and October 23rd minutes. We'll start with the September 18th minutes. I don't know if anybody had any amendments that needed to be made, or if I need to have a motion before that.
There are a couple minor points. None on September 18th.
Okay. Anybody else on September 18th? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Any abstentions? So we have a majority, so minutes pass. Hi, Dr. Lewis. We can move on to the October 18th, or October 23rd, I'm sorry.
Just have one on that. It's noted as an emergency meeting, and it was a regular scheduled meeting. So just with the deletion of emergency, that would make that one last correction.
Any other edits to the minutes for October 23rd?
What page was that in?
This was on the first page, where up at the top it
The
says
title.
emergency meeting in the title.
If there are no further edits, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Any seconds?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Or focused, yeah, that's discussion. Go ahead, Mr. Holloway.
Okay, now, from my understanding, are we, for a quorum, do we establish it's supposed to be 8 members or 6 members?
6 members.
6 members. Okay, I was understanding the bylaws said 8, but okay.
No, they say 6, and so we had 6 before Dr. Lewis showed up.
Okay, gotcha.
So I'll take that vote again. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So the minutes pass.
We do have 2 other sets of minutes that have been circulated. I don't know if
I haven't. Does anybody have a record of the minutes that we still need to approve? Then,
October 2 and October 23rd.
we just approved the October 23rd meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. It's October 2. And I think it's September 18th.
Which is the ones that we approved
No,
prior.
there's one other. October 2. I'll just bring up October 2 then. at this
Okay.
point.
So can staff work on getting us the minutes? Have those been sent out
They were sent out
Okay.
before the last meeting,
Before
and
the
then they were deferred
to the
off to this meeting.
What's that date again?
October
2nd.
2. We can certainly defer it again if
Yeah, because I don't think anyone has those on. Does anyone have the October 2nd minutes on them? No.
fine. Okay, all right, that's fine.
Do you want
We'll just hold.
Okay.
Ms. Richard, if you just make a note to make sure that gets on the agenda for next meeting. Thank you.
So next, I wanted to read into the record Chair Davis's remarks. Chair Davis couldn't be here today. I will skip over her section on executive director engagement, given the resignation of executive director Whedon. So I'll start with her executive board meetings and appointment section, and every board member should have an updated copy of the chair's remarks. The Executive Board met on Friday, November 1st to determine whether it would be necessary to reopen the review and comment portion of our MOU process due to the special request made by James Smallwood of the FOP. After a thorough review of the request, internal and external correspondences that have been shared with the COB and discussion among the Executive Committee, it was determined that such an extension was not necessary, and a response was emailed to James Smallwood on November 5th with attachments to detail the timeline and the COB's rationale for this decision. No response has been received to date. On Wednesday, November 13th, I called Mr. Jamel Campbell-Gooch to ask if he would accept the appointment of second vice chair on the COB Executive Committee due to the vacancy created by Mr. Bob Cooper's resignation. This was done in accordance with Article 7 of the COB bylaws. Mr. Campbell-Gooch accepted, and I then emailed Mr. Whedon to ask that he add Mr. Campbell-Gooch to the COB Executive Committee correspondences. I am greatly appreciative of Mr. Campbell-Gooch's unyielding commitment to public service. On Wednesday, November 13th, I messaged the members of the Executive Committee to call for an Executive Committee meeting on Monday, November 18th from 5:15 to 6 p.m. This meeting was called in preparation for the first negotiation task force meeting. Due to scheduling conflicts, the task force convened during the afternoon of November 18th, and as chair, I determined that it would still be important for the Executive Committee meeting to take place. Due to the news I received from Mr. Whedon regarding his resignation an hour before the start of the Executive Committee meeting, I took Mr. Whedon's resignation letter to the Executive Committee meeting and made everyone aware of it, and then moved forward with the business on the agenda, which included the negotiation task force. On the MOU negotiation task force, on Thursday, November 14th, I received a call from Mayor Cooper. The mayor called to discuss what opportunities there may be to ensure that the COB and MNPD can work together in a positive and collaborative nature. I shared with the mayor that the COB and the COB staff, the MNCO, remain open to ideas for collaboration, even if they are not on our own. The mayor then proposed that one member of the COB and one senior designee from MNPD be the representatives of the MOU negotiation task force, and asked me if this would be an approach we would agree to participate in, to which I agreed. I identified Dr. Hildreth as the COB's representative for this task force and shared that I was confident she would be more than willing to meet as frequently as necessary to ensure that the MOU continues to move towards finalization. As we concluded the meeting, the mayor shared that these meetings would be facilitated by Metro's legal director, Bob Cooper. My call with the mayor concluded, and I then received a call just short of an hour later from the mayor's office communicating that Chief Anderson had agreed to the terms of the negotiation task force that the mayor outlined and designated Deputy Chief Hager as their MNPD representative. During this call, it was also shared that the mayor wants the members of this task force to meet as frequently as possible to ensure that the MOU is finalized before the end of the calendar year. I communicated the COB's full support of this approach, and then we ended the call. As I have said before, I remain optimistic that we can and will be successful in our efforts to work with the MNPD to finalize an MOU that will position all parties to serve the people and communities of Nashville. I hope that you share all or part of this enthusiasm, and I also hope that the board appreciates the great success of the letter that we composed and sent to the mayor's office. A special thanks to Dr. Hildreth for partnering with me to compose this letter with a short turnaround time. I am also appreciative of Mayor Cooper's leadership and his administration's indispensable assistance. Regarding the executive director search, following my meeting with Mr. Whedon on Monday, November 18th, I emailed Metro HR Director Shannon Hall to make her aware of Mr. Whedon's decision and promised to share a copy of Mr. Whedon's resignation letter as soon as I got access to a scanner. This letter has been scanned and sent to Metro HR, MNCO, the COB, and the mayor's office. I will deliver the original copies upon my return to Nashville. Director Hall communicated her office's willingness to support the COB in the search and extended her time and the time of her staff to this end. I had a brief call with Metro HR on Wednesday, November 20th, and then requested time early next week to discuss the options to the COB and the executive director search. As I'm sure we can all remember, this type of search requires a time commitment outside of our normal board meetings, and for that reason, I'm asking everyone to tentatively hold the date and time of Wednesday, December 4th, from 4:30 to 6 p.m. for us to discuss the next steps in the executive director process and come to a consensus on the path forward. I intend to invite Metro HR to join us for this meeting, and I promise you all that I will make the most of our time. Thank you in advance for extending your time and talents to this effort. I truly appreciate the leadership by all. Wishing you all a productive COB meeting and a wonderful Thanksgiving to come. So given the chair's remarks, I wanted to give an update on our executive committee meeting on November 18th, where we discussed the mayor's new proposal. I'm not sure if Mr. Bunton is here yet. He's supposed to be representing the mayor's office today, and he was going to give a brief overview of the new negotiation task force. So at our executive committee meeting, Dr. Hildreth explained that she participated in an initial meeting with Deputy Chief Hager, despite not having authority from the board to proceed with this negotiating structure. So she would like us to consider the mayor's counter offer of the one-on-one negotiating task force as opposed to our original offer. She stated she would like the board to vote on that and to consider three things: the need for a definitive MOU draft for negotiation, the need to consider what the two parties have already proffered and what is already agreed upon, so taking into account Chief Anderson's directive that he sent and everything that we've provided, and the need to identify sticking points and making an agenda for the process going forward. During that executive committee, Chair Davis created a task force of one, which is Dr. Hildreth, to receive briefing.
Task force of one, me to brief her.
Or is it her to get briefed?
Me to brief her.
Okay. Scratch that. Chair Davis created a task force of one of Mr. Sweeney to solely provide background and support on the negotiations with the negotiations on the MOU. So through that, Mr. Sweeney having been the most involved in drafting the MOU, he will support Dr. Hildreth on all negotiations going forward. So we can discuss the structure of this negotiation if you would like, before having a motion to approve it. Mr. Sweeney?
Just one point for clarification. The role that I've been asked to play as far as the task force is purely informational. So as to explain how the drafting committee went about drafting the MOU, the factors it considered, the sources of that information, how it made kind of decisions between alternatives in constructing that, so that she fully understands what's in the agreement and why it's in the agreement and the method in which it's proposed. As far as negotiations and all like that, that's a matter that would be totally within her discretion, so I'm not part of any negotiating group. I am purely for briefing purposes.
And that's so we're in compliance with the Tennessee Open Meetings Act.
Absolutely.
Correct.
I move that we accept the mayor's redesigned task force model.
Second.
Any focused discussion on that? Mr. Campbell-Gooch?
Appreciate that, Chair. And for the sake of transparency, I do have an issue with it being such a closed-door meeting. So I know we have a second step after this vote, but I would like the board to think about ways that we can provide transparency, which we've done a great job of so far when it comes to this type of closed-door meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell-Gooch. I think during the executive committee meeting, we did discuss having weekly updates from Dr. Hildreth on the progress of the negotiations so that we could inform the community members on that end. Mr. Sweeney, was there anything else that we could add to that?
Yes, and then we plan to have executive committee meetings every 2 weeks
Correct.
in order to get further information on the negotiations and the discussions which have taken place. And then, assuming that we're working towards a year-end thereabouts agreement, there'll then be another board meeting in there as well, where it can be further discussed
Right.
publicly, fully, as to where we are in the process. And one other related proposal, though, that we had is to ask the board to grant the authority to the executive committee to give a final approval to a agreement with the police department so as to permit this expedited process. But that still would not occur until after another board meeting that we would be having in December. But assuming that with weekly meetings, there may be another meeting even in December after our next board meeting, and it may carry over into the early part of January before there's another board meeting. And so we thought that the way to pursue this most expeditiously would be to go through that process with the executive committee meetings, with a board meeting, but then having ultimate authority delegated to the executive committee from the board to approve an agreement.
Would you
Mr.
like me to amend my motion?
I think that can be
Not
a
yet.
separate motion.
Okay.
Mr. Holloway.
I'd just like to get a clarification from Mr. Campbell-Gooch when he's talking about a closed door and trying to get an understanding. You would just like to be there just for observation. Is that what you're talking about?
I mean, I would like for community members to have the option of being there for observation, but if it's only one board member, that it won't be an open meeting. We had talked previously about making it multiple board meetings to ensure that it was an open, multiple board members to ensure that if people did want to come and observe, they can observe in this form. But with the so the long-winded, yes.
Right. So with the negotiation task force one-on-one, it doesn't necessitate an open meeting, right? Yes, Mr. Holloway.
Yeah, I understand that, and we are making progress, and I'd like to thank the mayor for bringing us together,
Yes.
and hopefully we can do great accomplishments from that.
Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Any more focused discussion on that? Then we have a motion on the table to approve the new negotiating structure. Can we amend that motion to include the appointment of Dr. Hildreth as our representative?
Sure.
So there's a motion to approve the new negotiating structure with Dr. Hildreth representing the COB. All in favor?
Aye.
Did we get a second?
Yeah, let's do a roll call on this. So
I seconded your motion.
all in favor, hands, or we'll do a roll call. Mr. Holloway? Dr. Lewis?
I'll vote for my own motion.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Chicho? Yes. The motion passes. And now, as Mr. Sweeney mentioned, the executive committee discussed getting authority from the board to approve a final version of the MOU that has been negotiated, that authority rests with the executive committee. So I can entertain a motion on that, and we can discuss it.
I would move that the executive committee be granted the authority from the board to approve a final agreement MOU with the Metro Police Department, subject to an intervening board meeting between now and when that final approval would take place, at least one board meeting.
Any seconds?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Focus discussion. Mr. Turner, Chief Turner.
Will there be any adjustments or any amendment to the current MOU? Or will this document, is this the document that will be negotiated by Dr. Hildreth and Chief Hager?
This is what we're coming to the table with. We are not amending anything that the board approved. So one of the requirements Dr. Hildreth set out was having the final version dated and stamped with our approval of the MOU so she could take to the table and during her negotiating process. Obviously, that's not going to be the final version because it's a negotiation, but that is what she is going in with. Anything you want to add?
So the idea is to work off of that. That's a proposal that's been presented to the police department, and then walk through and negotiate on each of those and whatever additions or whatever deletions or whatever, but it's just the starting place.
Okay.
Any more focused discussion? We can vote on that. Do we want another roll call? No. So all in favor of, what was the motion?
The motion was for the board to grant the authority to the executive committee to approve a final agreement with the Metro Police Department of an MOU, with one condition being that there be an intervening board meeting before there's a final approval by the executive committee.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Okay, I think we may have a representative from the mayor's office. If you would like to give any remarks, I know we just went through the mayor's proposal, but we would like to hear from you as well.
Yes, I'd be happy to do so. So my name is John Bunton. I'm Mayor Cooper's Policy Director, and I want to thank the board for having me here today. I also want to thank you for entering into this discussions. As you know, Mayor Cooper is a strong supporter of the COB. He wants the relationship between the COB and Metro Police to work, and we are very hopeful that this process will lead to a memorandum of understanding by the end of the year. We appreciate your entering into it, as we appreciate Chief Anderson entering into these discussions as well. And we look forward to facilitating those discussions in the weeks going forward. So thank you again for your vote this evening to proceed. Greatly appreciate it.
With that, we can move on to the executive director report. Intern. And yeah, I would say to everyone here that in the absence of an executive director, Ms. Fitchard is the interim executive director while we search for a new one. So thank you very much, Ms. Fitchard, for stepping into this role.
No problem, thank you. So the executive director's report was already completed by Mr. Wheaton before he resigned, and so I am going to read a little bit from it, all right? So he started with community outreach and engagement, and since the last meeting that we had, which was on October the 23rd, there were some things that he has done up into his departure. The first one was we hosted a procedural justice and policy legitimacy training. That was on October the 24th and 25th. It was a great success. We had community members come out, and it was hosted by Mr. Wheaton, and then he invited officers from Chicago, the Chicago Police Department, and I thought that it was terrific. It was great training. The next thing is he met with NOAA. It looks like he's met with NOAA twice in the month of, well, in October and in November. And then he also was on a radio station where he talked about the Community Oversight Board. As it pertains to operations, of course, Mr. Bob Cooper has resigned, and we just discussed the negotiation task force. Some of the new things that I want to discuss on here is a meeting that he has on schedule with Kristen Wilson. She is the Chief of Operations and Performance for Mayor Cooper, and there is a monthly meeting of department heads, and I will be attending that meeting tomorrow in place of Mr. Wheaton. There's also a meeting scheduled November the 22nd with the District Attorney Liaison in regards to records and things that we're having to, like, if we need records or if we need to discuss cases. Todd and I will be attending that with the liaison, which is Attorney Jenny Charles. We finished the police academy yesterday. Yesterday was our last day. It was 12 weeks long, and we are very happy that we made it through, right? And we have, the MNCO has created a website. I'm not sure when it will launch, but it will be a link on our Metro Government's website that will link you to our outside website. Let's see here. And over the last few days, the IA Pro National Conference has been in town, and Mr. Valier and Mr. Pinkley have attended that in regards to case management and data systems and how we could possibly learn more about IA Pro and how they host data management, evidence-related materials, and so we're trying to figure out which one we're going to go with. Like, we haven't made a decision on what case management system that we're going to use, and we need to figure that out pretty quickly. Also, there is Mr. Wheaton created a strategic plan. Mr. Pinkley and I helped him with the 2-year strategic plan. I'm not going to get deep into it because I would like the board to review it. And once you review it, and maybe when we come back at our next meeting, we will have a document that is complete. And as for MOUs, there's nothing? Okay. All right. And that's all I have in the Executive Director's report. You have any questions?
Ms. Lewis, or Dr. Lewis?
As far as the Metro Police Academy training stuff, I think that maybe, this is a trial and error sort of process here, but I think that maybe we could improve on the courses that we took and the order in which we took them, and I would be happy to work with whoever's going to be doing that for the next group.
Okay, that'd be
I just
great.
wanted to make that comment.
Okay, that's awesome.
I think it would have been nice to have the OPA stuff sooner.
Yes.
If that had been possible.
Yeah,
And
I think
know
that's a
there's
great
time
idea.
constraints on everybody, but.
Okay. Sure.
Right, and that's one of the subjects, too, in the MOU for negotiation, because if you recall, as it was originally presented, we had a number of additional subjects that we asked to be addressed, and the first information that we got back in the preliminary exchanges that we had now months or weeks ago was that we get what the department has to offer, and there's nothing separate or special or different that they would be able to offer us. But that's something that is very much appropriate for the negotiations, so that we do get the information that's most valuable to us, because some of the information that's important for us to know is the training that officers receive, but some of it is more information that's kind of essential to the department and how the department works, so that we have a better understanding as to what we can do or should do policy-wise and otherwise. Like, it would be helpful if there were part of the program that addressed policy development in the police department. How does the police department develop policy, and what matters do they take into consideration, and et cetera, and et cetera. So I agree with you entirely, and hopefully there's room there to negotiate and figure out what's most useful. But it was excellent training. It was very helpful. It's just a thought that maybe it can be different, or it can be made a little more tailored to us and what we've been tasked to do under the charter.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Conbooch?
Jill, first I want to say thank you for being willing to step into these shoes. And I have just like a couple questions.
Okay.
And if you could just give me insight. I know this, like you said before, this was already created before resignation. I noticed that, has there been any discussion around just like community education? Starting to rep that up a little bit?
Yes, we have talked about that. We have some community education. These are some initiatives that we had discussed. I don't know if it was discussed with you. I can't remember if it was at a board meeting, but one of the things for community education was a community youth advisory council, and one of our investigators is heading that off, and she's already been in contact with Metro Public Schools to get that started. We think that we'll launch that maybe next school semester, since we're kind of getting late, a late start in the game with that. And I think sometime in early spring, we will do a survey to see how many children that might be interested in sitting on that youth advisory. Another issue was a community oversight internship program. We have had one person who is interested in interning with us from Vanderbilt, and so we have interviewed her, and hopefully we can get her started the first part of the year, like in January. And she will be doing 300, I think it's 300 hours that she'll be volunteering, so. And then, of course, Brinzy, our community liaison, has some other things that are set up to be, like, really, we're going to launch all that probably after the holidays, where she would be out in the community more, setting up these listening tours and other things that we have talked about in our strategic plan.
Okay. That sounds great. I think the more people we can get involved in this process,
Yes.
the better the outcomes. Yeah, for sure.
I did have one more update in regards to I think it's on the agenda, and that is to, our office space update. So the office space, we're in the process of moving this week. It's a lot going on. And so we're supposed to be moved in by Friday, but we have like 6 appointments that day with moving all of our equipment, the furniture, and all that. So it seems like Friday will be a little bit out of pocket, but that is our move-in date. We are supposed to move before the end of the month, so the 22nd and then I think the 25th are our dates to like have everything in that space. I will, on the next meeting in December, give you a budget update as it pertains to the cost of the build-out of the new space. Because there's lots of things that are going on and moving parts with having a new startup and building from the ground up a new department for Metro government. So we will have that information to you before our next board meeting, and then if you want to have more discussions about it, we can address it there. We are in the same location. We're just moved to the 3rd floor. And so it is in the Washington Square building. We are in Suite 370M. It is a nice space. It's not huge, but it's a nice space. And I think the community will enjoy it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Fitchard. I think we can move on to the MNCO mediation program.
Everyone should have an outline of programming in the package. If not, I've got it.
Yes.
So, as the board's aware, in a previous, the version of the rules that was approved, the board has approved a mediation program. The Rules and Bylaws Subcommittee met prior to the last board meeting to discuss the rules, or the SOPs involved in the mediation program. There's a lot of positive things that came out of that meeting, including the suggestion from the Rules and Subcommittee to talk to St. Louis about some of their programs, because they have 2 different programs that are working that have kind of established a strong precedent for how these types of programs should work. So we incorporated some of the recommendations from the St. Louis Oversight Committee's mediation program into this. So this is just a brief outline to kind of give a visual aid that shows how the program will go from start to finish. So that will be that a complaint will come in to MNCO regarding misconduct. Following that initial complaint, the investigators will conduct a preliminary investigation. As part of that preliminary investigation, the investigators will consider a few different factors, whether or not the officers or the employee have been correctly identified, whether or not the officer or employee is eligible for mediation. As it currently stands, the officers are only allowed to mediate 1 complaint every 12 months or 2 complaints in 36 months. I've discussed that with NCRC, who will be running the program. They felt that was too restrictive. I got that from a different jurisdiction. If the board has a feeling one way or the other on how they would like to limit the potential for abuse of the mediation program, I'm happy to change that. The other factors that the investigators will consider, whether or not there's any ongoing civil or criminal litigation, and then whether or not the complaint itself is actually eligible for mediation. Under the rules, there's 3 different categories that are ineligible for mediation: excessive force, serious bodily injury, and in-custody deaths. So if any complaints of those come in, they will automatically be disqualified from the mediation program and will go through the standard investigation process. Once the investigators have determined that all of the criteria are eligible for mediation, that will be referred to me to make a final review as to whether or not that case should be forwarded. One of the things that the Rules and Bylaws Committee discussed was that some cases may not be suitable for mediation as a result of a policy issue. So those cases will be referred to Ms. Fitchard for a final say on whether or not those should be forwarded onto the mediation program. Once it's determined that the complaint and the officers are eligible for mediation, either I or a member of the staff will contact the officer or the employee first to determine whether or not they're willing to participate in the mediation program. If the officer or the employee refuses participation, the complainant or the aggrieved party will not be contacted, and it will just proceed through the standard intake investigation process. If the officer agrees, then we will reach out to the complainant or the aggrieved party to see if they are also interested in mediation. If they decline mediation, then it will go through the standard investigation process. To reiterate, mediation is going to be voluntary and no one is going to be required to participate in any way. Once the parties have agreed to the mediation, I will complete the referral paperwork for NCRC. And additionally, a letter and mediation brochure will be mailed to both of the parties outlining the steps of the program and what they can expect in mediation. And then the sessions will be conducted by the trained staff over at the Nashville Conflict Resolution Center. And as a general practice, those sessions will be mediated by 2 NCRC mediators. As for special needs, at the time of referral, I will notify NCRC of any known special needs. Nashville Conflict Resolution Center does not provide interpreters, so our agency will use all the resources as a metro agency to provide whatever services are needed. After the parties have agreed, the date and time of the session will be scheduled by NCRC, and they will be conducted by NCRC in accordance with the best practices. As far as the attire for the officers, they'll be considered to be on duty during the mediation, but they are not permitted to wear uniforms. They'll be required to dress as if they were going to a court appearance. They are expected to adhere to any policy regarding service weapons, and that they should not be visible during the mediation session. Each party is going to be required to sign a confidentiality agreement at the outset of each session. And the parties will be permitted to take notes. However, all notes will be collected by the mediators at the close of the session and destroyed. And the sessions cannot be audio or video recorded. The mediators will adhere to Rule 31 of the Supreme Court rules. And following the session, NCRC will provide each party with an exit survey, which will then be forwarded to the agency, or forwarded to us to track the program's strengths and weaknesses and find areas where it can improve. There are multiple potential outcomes at the conclusion. If both parties participate in good faith as determined by the parties themselves, the mediation will be determined successful. There's been a trend in oversight to move away from a resolved complaint to a successful complaint because of how the cases will be closed if both parties come to the table and participate in the process. And the parties are in control of that decision, so they will be the ones signing the outcome agreement at the end of the mediation. If the parties determine that one or neither party has participated in good faith, the mediation will be determined unsuccessful and returned to MNCO for an investigation. If the officer or the employee fails to mediate without just cause, then the complaint will be referred back to MNCO for investigation. If the complainant fails to appear after it's been scheduled without a just cause, then the complaint will be closed. And that is, in a nutshell, the program. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
In the mediation, you say something about he can come in there with an armed weapon.
They are required to follow the MNPD's rules regarding firearms when they're on duty.
Okay, from my understanding, I think now they got a box where you can lock it up in the box and then you go into a hearing. Because you don't know how a person's gonna click when you get in there mediation.
Right. So I've discussed that with the director at NCRC, and my understanding, and Ms. Marsh can correct me if I'm wrong, based on the citizen police mediation session, is that the officers are permitted to wear their firearms during the mediation sessions, but they are supposed to be kept hidden. Is that correct?
That is correct. And so that is currently what OPA, with their police and citizen mediation program they have, that's something that they have approved, is that the officers are mediating on duty. And so whatever the MNPD policy is regarding being on duty and being armed is what the mediators are going to allow. The only stipulation is that service weapon not be visible to the party.
Well, that may be a good thing, maybe not, you know. You got to hit that shit doesn't make much difference because if he clicking there, he has access to it. It may be something they might want to reconsider, you know. But if you're going to go that way, and then, you know, you don't know how people, what they're going to do these days. So it might be something you can go back and take a look at and see if you can make a change on that or what, but, you know. Because he got it covered up, he still has it. And we have stranger things been happening today in the United States.
Mr. Holloway.
I just wanted to voice, I completely agree with Mr. Holloway. If we can figure out what level we need to press to get that changed, I know seems like that's bigger than the board, but I feel like community members would be concerned.
And sorry, go
No, keep going.
I'm supposed to have regular meetings with the executive director for NCRC, so I can always bring the board's concerns to her at the next meeting that I have with her.
Yeah, I would say just let us know in what direction we need to go to get that done, because I feel like that's even above NCRC's policies too, as far as when they get set. So I'm just curious on where we need to go with that. But my question is around the. I had a follow-up question around the officers may not mediate more than one MNCO complaint per 12 months. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned you got that from St. Louis?
I'm not sure if that one was St. Louis. That may have been from New Orleans. I've viewed so many different mediation programs from all different areas of the country. I'm not sure exactly where that one came from. Okay. The standard that I've seen to find across the different agencies was that most parties didn't allow more than one mediation per 12 months. That was the general rule. The no more than 2 in 36 months was only maybe a handful of those organizations. And like I said before, if the board feels differently about how they want to limit the ability to go to mediation, I'm happy to adjust that.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, the limitation makes sense. I guess I was just asking for more context behind it. You said that they said it was too restrictive?
So when I spoke to Director Feigl, she felt that it was restrictive. Maybe she was referring more to the no more than 2 in 36 months than the no more than 1 in 12.
Gotcha.
But she did say that that's at the board's discretion on how they want to limit it.
Okay. That's
Go ahead.
Would it make a difference on the type situation they trying to mediation again? What he was involved in? Would that have anything to do with as far as the limitation?
So it's strictly just related to any complaint that comes into MNCO. So if they get a complaint regarding something like discourtesy, that is a mediation eligible infraction. So they could take that into mediation. However, if, let's say, 6 months later, they also got something, maybe cuffs were put on too tight, then they would have already used their one mediation session. Because these complaints are left off their record, there's the potential for abuse that we're trying to limit by only allowing one per a certain time frame.
Yeah, it makes sense. Then again, depends on where you're working and depending on the high risk. You could be aggressive in certain locations, But 2 years, I don't think it's anything wrong with that.
And it is up to the officer whether or not they want to go to mediation. If they feel that their complaint about discourtesy or whatever is unfounded, they can proceed through the investigation process if they choose.
Ms. March and then Dr. Lewis.
So I just kind of want to add a little bit more information about the stipulation about the officers possibly having their service weapon. And I just wanted to add that the officers are on duty. So a lot of times they're leaving the precinct to come to the mediation, and sometimes we'll go back to the precinct to check in. And sometimes they're bidding off work and coming into a mediation. And so I think it just has to be some more discussion about if you're going to leave an officer unarmed while he is traveling to and from the precinct to the mediation or getting off work, and then where would that service weapon be secured? How would it be secured if he's traveling and he's on duty? So that discussion just probably needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. And then also just going to what Mr. Holloway was speaking on about the policy about mediating only once in a 12-month period. I do too also kind of think that may be a little restrictive, and that maybe that needs to be worked out a little bit more. I don't know if that means stipulating what type of complaints, or if that means
I see what you're saying.
or if that means adding, giving them more options to mediate more than once in a 12-month period. I know that there should be some review to make sure that the program is not being abused, some internal review by the staff to make sure that it's not being abused. And so I think that should act as a filter as well. And so maybe it doesn't have to be as restrictive as once every 12 months if there's some type of internal office review to make sure that mediation is not being abused.
Dr. Lewis.
I don't want to get too far into the weeds with this at this point, since it's all going to be things are going to be negotiated. But this limitation of one mediation every 12 months, I guess conceivably they could have an OPA mediation and a COB mediation within a 12-month period. So I don't know if that's something you need to address with this or what.
I guess maybe it goes into the MOU discussion.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. I think it's going to depend on that MOU discussion.
The jurisdiction.
Mr. Sweeney and then Mr. Holloway.
A couple things. Right now, the way the mediation is in the MOU, it's basically just an outlined program. It's not in this level of detail. The level of detail is within kind of the ambit of the COB. One potential way to address it is to have a guiding principle of 1 in a year or no more than 2 within 36 months, unless, the types of matters seem that it is productive of the process that we're trying to accomplish, and the director or the assistant director, I forget exactly the way it's structured, as far as the final approver, who can go into mediation, could then give authority to do it. So you might just build in a guiding rule and then some discretion. Yeah, maybe. And for good cause, that it could be waived, and then you want to document what good cause would mean in the circumstance. One question about the firearm. Ms. Marsh, I don't remember. If somebody goes into court now, can they bring a firearm in, or do they have to put it in a secured box?
An officer?
Yes.
He brings it in.
Okay. Are there any, I know that obviously when you go other places, into a jail or to the warrant office or whatever, sometimes people have to put their weapon into a secured box, right?
So in the past, when the officer was in booking, that was the only time that he would have to secure his weapon. And I'm not quite sure if that's still the protocol. I'm assuming that because booking is the sheriff's department.
Right.
I would assume that that's probably still the protocol.
Right.
And the officers in booking for a very short period of time to turn over the person that's been detained or arrested. And that's a very short period of time. And then they retrieve their firearm, and then that's the only time that I'm aware of that they're.
So in the ride-along that I did, we did go to booking, and it was secured in that way. Is there the potential to have that type of secured box or whatever for a weapon of the mediation, so that you don't have the issue of the officer being able to carry the weapon on the way to work, but just during the time that they're in the mediation,
So
that it's secured? We'd obviously have to provide to them that mechanism or that facility, but I wonder if that's an option.
So that was something that he would have to speak with the director at NCRC about. I think that's something that she would consider.
Okay. So maybe there's some flexibility there.
Mr. Holloway?
We stole the words out of my mouth. Lock boxes would be a good process that they could do. You can go to the federal courthouse, you lock your guns up, you get ready to leave, you get your gun back, but you have access to a key yourself. So I don't think it's a bad idea, but it's something they might want to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Any further discussion on the mediation program?
Yeah. Sorry, I have one other question. And so on the first page at the very bottom, it mentions that it will be conducted by NCRC trained Rule 31 mediator. Can you kind of tell me what that means? Does that mean that the mediator will only have to be trained by NCRC? Or can there be a Rule 31 mediator that got the training from somewhere else and is now mediating at NCRC? And that Rule 31, that narrows it down because Rule 31, in order to be a Rule 31, there are a couple requirements, and so that does narrow down because not all mediators are Rule 31. They're Rule 31. They have a training that is approved by the Tennessee Supreme Court, but they're not Rule 31 listed. So I just kind of want some clarity around that.
So they can be trained by anyone as long as they have the requisite training. That's one of the discussions that Director Feigl and I have had, is whether or not they have to be Rule 31 listed or just have received a similar level of training. And Director Feigl raised some of the same issues that you just raised. It does significantly limit who is potentially eligible to do these mediations if you go strictly with someone who's Rule 31 listed. I'll leave that to the board's discretion if they want to limit it to only 31 listed mediators, or if you are satisfied with equivalent training, then it's at the board's discretion.
So I guess my question is, what did you mean when it was written here? Because I think this is what you have already discussed with the director. So what's the meaning of this at the bottom of this page?
So when I discussed it with Director Feigl, it was Rule 31 or equivalent training. It wasn't strictly just Rule 31 listed. But if the board feels that they need to be Rule 31 listed, then it's the board's programs. It's discretion.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yeah, when we were discussing this at one stage before, we also noted that these are unique types of mediations, and that not anybody who's just a Rule 31 mediator would be somebody who is appropriate to do this. And Ms. Marsh, you then told us that so far, at least, all of these have been mediated by the director, if I recall right, and she has that police citizen experience that makes her, very, very appropriate to do these types of mediations. Do you think that we need to specifically state in here that it's going to be people who are either trained in or have the experience in police-civilian mediation, so it's not just a newbie coming in to mediate these types of matters? Since you've been involved in these matters so far, it would be really helpful to get your sense as to what other specifics in that regard should be contained in the
Well, one way of looking at it is that NCRC is a approved training site by the Tennessee Supreme Court. So their training is going to be Rule 31 training anyway. Then they're actually adding an additional level of training for police and citizen. It's an informal style training. The mediators are handpicked, and they are trained by individuals that have mediated in that program already. And so that's one way of looking at it, as to say that if NCRC is the agency that this board is choosing to do the mediation, then the mediators are going to have that Rule 31 training no matter what. And they're also going to have that additional extra layer of training for police and citizen mediation. And so my personal thought is that we don't need to restrict it to just a Rule 31 mediator, because that is that still concern of, because they're Rule 31, that's not necessarily, they got their training from somewhere else and could be working with NCRC. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are trained to do that style of mediation. And so I don't think we should narrow it down to a Rule 31 mediator.
So should it say Rule 31 trained mediator, or a mediator trained through a Rule 31 program with police citizen mediation training, or something like that?
That's exactly what it should say.
Yeah.
Any more discussion on the mediation program? Then I don't think we need to vote.
It's already been approved.
It's already been approved, right?
This is just informative.
Okay. Okay, so with that, yes, Mr. Campbell-Gooch.
I had a question about
Sure.
the report right here. And it's just a real quick question. The ones that says data needed, can somebody explain what that means? 'Cause I know we received a data set. So when it says, like, I know the set is limited, so I'm just curious about it. I don't know if Peter needs to. Is he here? I'll take time.
What was your question, Jimmy?
So I was just wanting more insight into when it says, when it indicates that data's needed on some of these. Because I understand that we received a data set. So I'm just trying to have conversations around maybe the limitations or where the cracks are.
We've received data sets, not, so perhaps we haven't gotten specific ones? Is that? Yeah.
Does
Dr.
While he's
Villiers?
coming, I'll tell you a little bit about this report. This is a report that was requested, if you look on the executive director's report, and it explains, we were asked what kind of records we were asked by the mayor's office what kind of records that we needed and records that we would, records that we would need for the future. And so I created this. I conferred with Mr. Villiers, Dr. Villiers, and these are some of the reports that he actually said that he would need. And then there were some others that we didn't get a chance to put on there. So he can explain to you a little bit more in detail on what he needed exactly.
Sure. So this document was created by going through the list of departmental forms and looking at, for the negotiation with MNPD, what the investigators would need and what researchers would need in order to be conducting analysis. So we went through and looked at data that we had, that we've already received, data that we think that would be useful for research, that we would like to receive, and those we'd like to be part of the negotiation between MNCO or the COB and MNPD. So this document is listing data that will be part of negotiating about records and documents.
Okay. So this just specifically lays out data sets that we need in order to.
Yeah, so most of these we already have. We want to make sure that they're explicitly discussed as needed in a database format as the negotiation takes place, and make sure that that's included in any conversations around records and what that looks like.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes. Mr. Villiers, what's the difference between report and data as used in this form?
In this form, I believe the difference is reports are referring to individual complete reports, including summaries and narratives, whereas data would be the
Compilation.
The quantitative information from the forms without the narratives attached.
Okay. And so why do some have both reports and data, and some only have report?
So some are needed
Or some
by
only
investigators with the complete summaries. In order to conduct investigations, they need the complete reports and forms, whereas for most records, we don't, when we're, for instance, if we're looking at incident databases, we don't need the entire incident report or entire incident summary and narrative from the officers in order to understand that a shooting occurred or that an arrest was made or something like that.
Okay, so taking that one as an example, it's the first one that's listed on this document. And so it has incident report, and it has a X next to it, and then data needed, it has the X next to it.
Yes.
So that means we would need both of those, or there are occasions where we would need both of those, or what does it mean?
So the reports would be needed as for investigators. The complete reports with summaries and narratives would be needed to complete investigations.
A particular investigation.
A particular investigation. Whereas the data would be needed for all incidents across longer time frames.
For a policy review.
For policy reviews and research purposes.
Yes, okay.
Thank you, Dr. Villier. Any more questions before we move on? We can move on to the public comments section of this. So just a reminder, you have 3 minutes. If I could get Mr. Campbell Gooch to give a 1-minute warning to the speakers. So yes, okay. First, if you could have Mr. Timothy Hughes.
Good evening, everyone. And so I'll be giving public comment on behalf of a member of the Coalition for Community Oversight Now. Hello, everyone. My name is Kate Briefs. I'm a white cisgendered upper-class woman, and since moving here in 2018, I've been following the creation of this board. I appreciate the time and space you build into the monthly meetings for community participation. While I'm unable to be here with you today, I've been reflecting on some of the conversations that have occurred at the October COB meeting and feel compelled to share some thoughts. First, let me say that I am deeply grateful for all the work that you've done and want to acknowledge the many sacrifices that you make and challenges you face. Frankly, I wouldn't share my concerns with you if I didn't have deep respect for this board and for our community. Last month, during the conversation around how to engage with the MMPD, the language of using honey instead of vinegar came up, and it shaped a lot of the conversation. I think we need to be cautious with such language and this ideology. I don't love the saying you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, because honey does not work equally for everyone, and because honey and vinegar are both nutritious and needed, so there is no need to suggest that one is inherently better than the other. The fact is that this board is a result of generations of state-sponsored violence against Black peoples and other peoples of color that continues to happen without a sense of accountability. You guys are the vinegar, and without the exhaustive, unpaid labor of the families and communities of those who have been murdered by police, specifically Daniel Hambrick and Jacquez Clemens, this board would not exist. I don't know what type of progress can be made or taken place with the MMPD over the past month, but I encourage you to embrace the vinegar, because honey and vinegar don't attract the same flies. If you use honey to catch the attention and participation of MMPD, it will require you to bend and concede, but our community needs you to stay tough and strong, because the challenges will never end for you all, and if you start to make concessions now, it will be expected in the future. In the eyes of MMPD, you are the vinegar, and there's nothing wrong with that, because we voted for you, we support you, and we need you to hold firm and hold the MMPD accountable, even if that means standing firm and being seen as the vinegar. Thank you to Timothy Hughes for reading this on my behalf. Thank you all for listening, and most of all, thank you to the folks of Community Oversight Now for your creation of this board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Next, we have Ms. Hudson McBride.
Susan Hudson McBride, and also a core member of Community Oversight Now. And I wanted to speak today because I feel like you all need to know you're very supported. When the couple of years that we were pulling together to get to the point where there was a referendum to go on to the ballot, we had a lot of pushback. I didn't presume that once the ballot passed by way of 59% of the vote that the pushback would stop. It hasn't. And I'm very frustrated that we're still dealing with a lot of the same things. And in fact, I think in some ways, I've seen more of the passive-aggressive side of Chief Anderson come out publicly, which in a way I'm grateful for. That mess needs to come out. But I want you all to know that the people who voted for this COB very much want it to succeed, and we will be behind you in any way we can to make sure it does.
Thank you, Ms. Hudson McBride. Next, we have Ms. Smollett.
Thank you very much for your time and all. And I wanted to speak about the police in Briley Parkway. I noticed that the police from Briley Parkway going into Hermitage, there's a lot of them, but they're really watching the companies and the stores, like the, maybe the Walmart and the Dollar General and places like that. But they're offensive because they want to follow the regular citizen. Because we don't come into the Publix or a store like that to bother or to steal something. But I've seen the police cars actually following people. Now, my suggestion is this, that I live in the Nashville portion, which is on the other side of the Briley Parkway, and on one side is Donaldson. And now Donaldson is where they love to be. So I'm saying, look, go on over there and stay. But we need to have a strip mall, maybe 2 or 3 a CVS, and something comfortable there in the Nashville portion going toward downtown, so that we can go across the street, get what little thing we want, and go back safely without somebody watching and following us and giving us the, like, you know, we think you're going to take something or something. We don't need it, none of us that live in that area, or if I'm living down anywhere, it's out to steal something. So that's what my thing is. I'm sort of tired of them. Let them go right on closer, which they'll be closer to Hermitage, where their station is. And then we'll be in the area where we feel safer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mollett. Before I open it up to new business and announcements, I just want to first remind our board of the media policy and our bylaws. So only the board, only the chair of the board and the executive director should make statements on behalf of the board. Just a reminder of that, given all the cameras that we have here today. And also to everyone here who's not aware, we're short-staffed today on the board side. One of our board members, Ms. Ross, her mother passed away, so she is with her family now. We send her our best wishes. I know there's a card going around for board to sign, so if you haven't signed it, please do. And with that, I will open it to announcements and new business. Ms. Fitchard?
I want to say that after the announcement of Mr. Wheaton's resignation, the first order of business was to make sure my staff was handling the news to the best of their ability. We met and they assured me that they were doing well and expressed their support. We are committed to continuing the work that we have ahead of us. Moreover, we are grateful for and appreciate the work that Mr. Wheaton started in Nashville, and although his departure was not expected, and he will be missed, the MNCO is already back to business and will continue moving forward. I want to acknowledge and thank those in the community and in the administration who have offered their continual support, and of course, thank the board members of the COB for this opportunity and their trust as I lead this office until a new executive director is named.
Thank you, Ms. Fitchard. I know I can speak for Chair Davis and I think the rest of this board that we have every confidence that you will take us and MNCO forward. Mr. Holloway?
I have all confidence in her, and I know she'll do a good job. And I will hope that she is able to apply for that position.
Well, we have to discuss all the specifics with Metro HR before we can get into that. Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Anything else? If not, I will take a motion to adjourn. A second? All in favor? It is 5:12 and this meeting is adjourned.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.